For today's Your Case Monday, we're going to be talking about Dean, I guess, Corll, the Candyman. I'm sure a lot of y'all are familiar with this. The name Candyman rang more with me than anything else. So this is for Your Case Monday. I can't remember her name on YouTube, but she requested this. And we're friends on Facebook, but I don't know if her name is the same. When Dean Corll was shot to death by his 17-year-old accomplice, the number of boys he had killed in 2.5 years made him America's most prolific serial killer to date. Yeah, this story is really crazy. Really, really, really crazy. When Dean Corll's secret life was revealed, the world learned that this unassuming electrician was actually the worst serial killer the country had seen. To everyone in this Houston Heights neighborhood, let me get that off. To everyone in this Houston Heights neighborhood, a few miles west of downtown Houston, Texas, Dean Corll, I hope I'm saying that name right, seemed like a decent, ordinary man. He spent his time at a small candy factory his mother owned in Houston Heights and got along well with the neighborhood boys. He even gave free candy to local school children, earning him the nickname the Candyman. Holy shit, guys. Oh my God, people are so sick. But behind that smile, Dean Corll hid a deadly secret. When he was murdered in 1973 by Elmer Wayne Henley, the young man's confession revealed horrifying details of Corll's 2.5-year-long killing spree, one that would make him the worst serial killer America had ever seen. The early life and career of Dean Candyman Corll. While it is standard trope in serial killer lore that there is later depravity can often be traced back to some childhood event or traumas, it is difficult to see anything in what is known about Dean Corll's early life that could have put him on the path to becoming one of the worst, America's worst serial killers. Almost said America's most wanted. Born in 1939 in Fort Wayne, Indiana, his parents reportedly never had a happy marriage. They would fight often, and Corll's father was known to be a strict disciplinarian. Let's see. Whether this resulted in far worse abuse than would have ever been typical for a commonly acceptable corporal punishment method of the 1940s and the 50s isn't known. After his parents divorced for the second time, they had briefly reconciled following their first divorce in 1946. His mother remarried, this time to a traveling salesman. The family settled down in a small town of Vendor, Texas. In school, Corll was well-behaved, if solitary young man, solitary. His grades were decent enough to escape notice, either for good or for ill. He occasionally dated girls from the neighborhood or school. Let's see. It was his mother's candy shop, however, that would be the nexus between the seemingly normal story of a typical American boy in the 1950s and the vile monster who, by 1973, had brutalized, mutilated, and murdered at least 30 boys between the ages of 13 and 20 in just 2.5 years. Yeah, I'm aware of the outline of the story, and it's completely awful. And it really makes me, about well, he's not a young man now, he's an old man now in prison, but makes me kind of question, I don't know, how culpable were these kids, Initially started in the family garage, Pecan Prince, the candy company that Corll's mother and stepfather started in the mid-1950s, brought Dean Corll into the candy business from the very start. His stepfather sold candy on his sales route, and his mother managed an actual business. Corll and his younger brother operated the machines that produced the candy and the company sold. After his mother divorced her second husband in 1963, Corll had graduated high school and had been making the candy for years for the family business. After a brief 2-year stint back in Indiana to care for his widowed grandmother, he returned to Houston to help his mother with a new venture, calling it the Corll Candy Company. Corll's mother started the business in Houston Heights area that same year, naming Dean Corll vice president and his younger brother the company's secretary treasurer. Let's see. I said he was briefly in the Army in 1964. Oh, well, it just read that too. After being drafted, from which he was honorably discharged under hardship exception, Corll worked at his mother's company until it was dissolved several years later. Almost immediately after the company started, though, there were warning signs about Dean Corll. A young teenage boy who worked at the company complained to Corll's mother that Dean had made sexual advances towards him. His mother fired the boy. Ain't that some shit? No, not my son. No, my son wouldn't do that. She's one of those. Well, I mean, I guess at first glance, if you don't see any signs, let's just read. I'm getting way ahead of myself here. There were other boys around the candy factory as well, most of whom were runaways other troubled youths. Dean Corll had an easy rapport with the teens and the young men and known to give free candy to the local school children. Good God. Creepy. Let's see. Inside a small factory, Corll reportedly installed a pool table where employees of the company and their friends, nearly all of them teenage boys, would congregate throughout the day. Corll was openly flirtatious and befriended many of them. Wow. Y'all got to think, too, about this time frame. This was in Texas. So just that statement alone is pretty brazen for this time era, Among them was David Brooks, then just a 12-year-old boy in the 6th grade. Like many other children in the area, he was first introduced to Corll with offers of free candy and a place to hang out. Corll began grooming Brooks over a period of 2 years and soon began abusing the boy. Abusing him. Then around 14, bribing him with gifts and money for his silence. Man, well, what kind of picture is that? Child, y'all can read that word. Escalates to murder. SA abuse escalates to murder. We'll just say that. Jeffrey Cohen, is the earliest known victim of the Candyman killer, murdered in 1970 when the investigators suspect Dean Corll offered Corinne a ride while was hitchhiking home. In 1970, why would I gotta stop doing that. Okay. Hitchhiking home from Houston from University of Texas at Austin. He was likely picked up by Corll with an offer of a ride to his parents' house. Corll lived very near to the intersection where Corll had been dropped off last. Around this time, Brooks discovered Corll while he was blanking 2 teenage boys in his home. Corll later confessed to Brooks that he had killed them to buy Brooks' silence. Corll bought him a Chevrolet Corvette and offered him $5 or $10 for each boy he brought to Corll. Oh my God, which Brooks agreed to. You gotta think, grooming, all this stuff, the murder is what sets this apart from, very similar to Egghead and Jalopy. They had a thing going on, but these were kids. But they had, they had younger people procuring victims for them too. Groomed them, young adults, 16 to 20, one of the boys Brooks brought to Corll was Elmer Wayne Hensley, but rather than blank and kill the boy, he tried to enlist him in his blank and murder scheme. As well as the same bounty per victim brought Corll offered Brooks. Holy crap, man. This is crazy. Henley has said that he initially refused the offer, but his family financial hardship caused him to accept it. Together between December 13, 1970 and July 25, 1973, Brooks and Henley would lure at least 28 boys, ranging from the age 13 to 20. Man. The 3 used Corll's Plymouth GTX or white van to entice the boys to come with them. With Corll using candy, alcohol, promises to go to a party to get each teenager inside. Anyone who got in never came back. Dean Corll and his accomplices would take the boys to his apartment or house where they bound and gagged each victim through various methods. Then Corll forced them to write postcards or notes home to their families and to say that they were okay, after which the three would tie the victim up with a wooden torture board, whereupon the three would blank him. Wow. Wow. I mean, and it's kind of safe to say that these boys didn't even have a preference in other boys. I don't know. I'm just saying. But, I mean, could they have developed that preference? You know, I guess it's just a question to mull over, you know. Afterward, some were strangled to death. Others were shot. But regardless of the method, every boy brought to Corll was murdered, with Brooks and Henley actively participating in the crimes. Wow. Let's see. One of Corll's victims, Mark Scott, was 17 when he disappeared on the evening of April 20th, 1972. Frantic. His parents reported him missing after calling classmates, friends, and neighbors to see if they knew anything. A couple of days later, the Scott family received a postcard purportedly from Mark saying that he had found a job in Austin that paid $3 per hour and they should not worry. Let's see. The Scotts did not believe that their boy would suddenly leave town without saying goodbye and knew something was terribly wrong. Well, yeah. And it's the same today. People know their kids. People know their kids, you know. It's like sometimes with runaways or, you know, runaways, teenagers, a lot of times your first knee-jerk response is to say, oh, they're a runaway. But if the parents is telling you, you know, anyways, that's just my little side thought. Let's see, like many of the families of Corll's victims received little, if any, help from Houston Police Department in their findings for missing sons. I camped out on that police department door for 8 months, Edward Waldrop told reporters, after police had found the remains of his two sons, Jerry, 13, Donald, 15, both victims of Corll's. Holy shit. But all they did was say, why are you down here? You knew your boys were running away. This is the shit I'm talking about right here. This is exactly the shit that I'm talking about. Other families of Corll's victims reported similar indifferences to the families' pleas for help finding their sons in Texas. In the early 1970s, it wasn't illegal for a child to run away from home. So the chief of Houston Police Department claimed that there was nothing they could do to help them. Praise God for new laws, even though, you know, we got a lot of things we're not happy with. There's a lot of things to be grateful for, too. Really. The chief was voted out of office in the first election held after Corll's murders became known to the public. Well, I should say so. Psh, piece of shit. Let's see. On August 8th, 1973, after 2.5 years, 28 known murders, Corll finally turned on Henley after luring two teens, Tim Curley and Rhonda Williams. Oh, a girl. Rhonda Williams, the only teenage girl known to have been targeted during the Houston mass murders, to Corll's apartment. Williams knew Dean. Oh, it jumped. The ad took over me. Let's see. Williams knew Dean Corll from the neighborhood and trusted Henley, who was her friend. She didn't suspect that she was in any danger. They partied through the night, huffing paint, getting high, drinking heavily. Henley said that when they woke up, he discovered that he was tied up alongside Curley and Williams. Wait, what's that? Let me see. Henley said that when he woke up, he discovered that he was tied up alongside Curley and Williams, and that Corll was screaming at him while waving his .22 caliber pistol. I'm going to kill you, Corll threatened, but first I'm going to have my fun. Henley pleaded with Corll to untie him, saying that the two of them could blank and kill Williams and Curley together. Eventually, Corll did untie Henley and brought Curley to the bedroom and tied him up to the torture board. I hope I can say that. I have no clue. Let's see. In doing so, Corll placed the gun on the nightstand next to the bed. Williams, who survived the attack, and only spoke publicly about it in 2013. Recalled how Corll's behavior was visibly shaken, something loose in Henley's mind. He stood at my feet and just all of a sudden told Dean this couldn't keep going on. He couldn't keep letting him, wait a minute, let me read this again. This couldn't go on. He couldn't let him keep killing his friends, and it had to stop, she recalled. Dean looked up, and he was surprised. He started getting up, and he was like, "You're not going to do anything to me." That moment when you take your power back is pretty incredible. It didn't say that in the article. I'm just saying, anybody, when they take their power back, that's big, and we're supposed to do that. Then, without another word, Dean Corll's blank torture and murder spree came to an end as Wayne Henley shot him 6 times with the gun he had taken from the nightstand, killing him. Let's see. Henley and Brooks sentenced after mass murder revealed. Henley untied Kearney and Williams, then called the police. He and Brooks confessed shortly afterward, and Henley offered to show police where the boys they and Corll had murdered were buried. Within a week, investigators found 17 victims buried in the boathouse shed that Corll had been renting. Another 6 bodies were in Bolivar Peninsula, while 4 victims were buried in a woodland area at Lake Sam Rayburn. Wow. Police didn't identify the 28th victim until 1983, and there's no telling how many others Corll might have killed that Henley and Brooks didn't know about. Hey, that's very valid. That is very valid. Henley was convicted of 6 murders and sentenced to 6 life sentences served concurrently, while Brooks was convicted on 1 murder and received life sentence as well. Man. When in 1973? Let's see. Season 2, Next Crime, Mindhunter. Oh, well, I'm going to have to see that. Henley was remanded and particularly controversial figure over the last few decades, including putting artwork he had created up in prison for sale at auction and creating his own Facebook page as a public figure. Elmer Wayne Hensley is also featured in the 2nd season of Netflix serial killer crime drama Mindhunter, portrayed as Robert Arameo. Oh my gosh, I cannot talk, and I probably still said it wrong. Very little else is known about Dean Corll. A few photos of him are known to exist after his death. Those who knew him would have every reason in the world to want to forget that they ever did. Now that he was now the worst serial killer the country had ever seen. There would be worse mass murders in decades that followed, but no accounting of Corll's crimes have ever been truly made, nor likely to ever be. Wow. Okay, let me get back to y'all. That was lengthy, but it